Hi, everybody. Welcome to Cocktails and Conversation. My name is Heather,
I'm Larry Huynh on the
and
West Coast.
we're gonna do the coastal thing. Okay,
Yes.
East Coast, West Coast, Biggie, Tupac, but we're friends. We're not rivals.
No.
Um, and in fact, we are united because America has been going through some things,
Just a
and
little.
so we thought it would be fun because we both love cocktails. And we both love America, but we're very concerned about America right now to get together, have a cocktail, and have a conversation about what's been going on in the
Yeah,
world.
we
So
gotta we gotta talk through it sometimes.
you got to talk through it, and it's always better with a little. Larry is going to be our cocktail captain this week. So, Larry, let's talk about the cocktail that you chose, and then we'll tick through some of the issues we want to talk about on Friday, April 4th. It has been a week. And
Oh my
so,
God.
yes.
Yeah,
Tell
so
me
we
what we're
need this.
drinking.
But I chose Moscow Mules because it's a little bit early out here on the West Coast. I'm not opposed to day drinking, but this is morning drinking. So I'm gonna make the mocktail version of a Moscow Mule, which is just for me, just basically some ginger beer, some lime juice, and because I gotta spruce it up because I don't get the vodka, I'm gonna add a little bit of mint just to make it good.
Ooh.
And I'm gonna be able
Ooh.
to make a couple for my kids, which I don't share my normal cocktails with them, but I can share them with this.
Well, I'm doing the real deal with Tito's. So, because it is not morning for me. And, it's funny because I was looking this up, and there's the old school way with simple syrup and including that in there. But I am doing so I actually could do it both ways because I do have both the fever tree as well as the I made ginger simple syrup.
Very nice.
Yeah, very
Yeah,
bougie on my part, but
and
yeah.
for those who may not know, a simple change, if you're just going to turn if you want it to be a dark and stormy, you're switching it with dark rum instead of vodka.
Or right, if you throw bourbon into it and mint, then you've got your mint
Kentucky
jeweler,
Mule.
Kentucky
Yeah, yeah.
Mule.
And yep. And then, anyway, we could talk about this for days, but we've got things to talk about, right?
Yes. So cheers.
Cheers.
So what we got on tap, obviously, it cannot be the week that we have had without talking about tariffs. We had Liberation Day, and let me tell you, we are experiencing a Liberation Day hangover. So we're obviously going to talk a little bit about that. Signalgate, which broke about a week and a half ago, almost 2 weeks ago, but there are ongoing and continuing reverberations, developments that are being reported, and of course, Laura Loomer's involved. So it wouldn't be Signalgate or national security without Laura Loomer for some insane
Because
reason.
she knows so much about this. It's really important for her to be involved.
Exactly.
So,
Now, turning to slightly more domestic spaces, Social Security, really excited to dig into that. Well, excited is the wrong word. Some
no,
stuff
no.
is going on with Social Security, very concerning, and want to talk through that because the bait and switch that we're seeing from elected Republicans and the Trump administration and Doge on this is pretty striking. We want to make sure we're unpacking that and making sure people are aware of it. It was also a really bad week for HHS with with 10,000 layoffs there. Want to talk through that. But we got a couple of good things to talk about this week, too. Cory Booker and his record setting speech on the Senate floor, and some interesting pop culture notes we want to share with you. So, Larry, I want your take on the past 48 hours of Liberation Day and how it is showing up. It seems to me like the Trump administration, whether they thought this was true or they're just trying to make it so, really is trying to frame this as the necessary step for the glory days. But it sure doesn't look like that
I
right
don't know.
now.
Yeah, it's just so much of this administration is really like if I had put my son Dashel in charge, it's just like tantrum after tantrum, and this feels like just another tantrum. By the way, the formula is for those who don't know the formula that they put out because people are like, how did you come up with these numbers? And they put up like a formula with an extra epsilon and extra phi and deltas and things to make it look cool, and it just they're so dumb. It's basically good amount of goods, uh, you know, imported versus amount of goods exported. It's a subtraction divided, but it's just the trade deficit. And then Trump, realizing it was too big, they're like, hey, just divide by two. So yes, in fact, we are ruled by morons. It's kind of, I think a lot of like the country doesn't want to believe how extreme and how far Trump will go. So the market didn't price it in. Tanked yesterday, is again tanking today. Unclear when it's ever going to end. And the explanations that the Trump folks have for it, completely incoherent. So I mean, they don't have a point of view other than it's not fair, which I think I hear is happening upstairs right now with my two kids. So that just tells you what it's like.
So that is all. It's been amazing to watch this train wreck play out. Two things strike me about it. One is they announced a month ago that today was going to be Liberation Day, right? They were building up to it. They gave Canada and Mexico reprieve and said, okay, April 2nd's Liberation Day. We're not doing April 1st because we don't want people to think this is a joke. Right? Donald Trump literally said that. And so
it's the sickest joke, though. It's the sickest.
It's the sickest joke, and it ain't funny. If this is a joke, it ain't funny, right? But the bigger challenge for me on this is they had a month to do this, and it was being reported that they were coming up with the tariff formulations and all your fancy epsilons and upsilons and the Greek that I no longer remember from high school calculus or whatever, like 2 days out. 48 hours out with 30 days of very clear runway that this was going to be the day. Number one, to tack onto your note on the formula, there's actually a story. The Verge had a great story, also very concerning, that if you were to enter if you were to do a prompt into Chat GPT,
or I think all of them came back with similar formulas.
Exactly. And so that's a little concerning if you were like running our economic policy, our trade policy by asking Chat GPT a question. Yeah, it's a little bit messed up, right?
Well, doesn't it feel like again, you didn't do your homework. You didn't do any work. You asked Chat GPT for it. You look at the formula like, that's too simple. Let's add some extra Greek letters to make us seem smart.
Exactly.
That's basically what happened. We are ruled by morons.
And the second point, which I think is actually concerning, well, maybe as concerning, I'm not sure, is Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, right? He was going to be the adult in the room this year. He came from Wall Street. He clearly lost the argument. He was cut out of the loop. No. And I have not seen him since the first round of reactions on Wednesday afternoon. So that's
the thing is, the last thing I think he said was like, hey, when we get these tariffs on you, don't retaliate. Because why? And of course, by the way, this morning, I think China's 34% retaliatory tariffs. So of course they did, because what? They're going to just sit and take it?
No.
So no.
Exactly. Canada's already retaliated. China's retaliating. The EU is likely to come out with retaliatory tariffs next week. And so the idea that, well, you just need to sit there and take it and it won't get worse for you, right? That sounds like mob stuff.
The thing it will, because what happens is the inventory is already in the United States. So unless retailers just preemptively mark things up, the cost of goods sold there have already been established. So your prices technically shouldn't go up until about 3 or 4 months when they have to replace that inventory. And those will be subject to tariffs. So if anything goes up immediately and it's already been in the store, they're screwing you over. There is no end game is the problem.
Yes.
There's no
Unlike Avengers, even if Donald Trump thinks he's Thanos, there is no end game.
No,
and that's the problem.
He wishes.
I do want to move on to Social Security. I had this moment maybe a week ago, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and it was like something weird clicked in my brain where I realized I had been listening to the wrong things about the way that the Republicans have been talking about Social Security.
Yeah,
so the way they talk about it, if you listen to them on camera, they say, we're not going to touch Social Security benefits. We're not going to touch Social Security benefits, right? The average person hears Social Security. I'm not going to touch Social Security. But what the Republican key word is benefits. And so
Hmm.
everything
Yeah.
else, the Doge people,
Yeah.
they're closing Social Security offices, they are firing Social Security staff, and what is happening? The system is slowly
It's
breaking,
breaking. Yeah.
right? Wait times are now up to reportedly 2 hours. They are apparently going to rewrite the code in a matter of
Oh,
weeks, which is
great. I
banana
can't wait.
pants,
Yep.
bonkers,
Exciting.
right? And just today, they announced apparently another round of layoffs that they are going to undertake for Social Security staff. And so Americans really, I'm hoping, will wake up to the fact that when they say they aren't going to touch your benefits,
Right.
breaking everything else so that you feel like your benefits aren't secure.
Right. It's funny. We both work in politics. We were dealing with this in a campaign last cycle where we had to say they're trying to uh, the lawyers made us adjust scripts because we couldn't say cut Social Security benefits, and that's basically what you're saying. They're cutting the infrastructure so that functionally the benefits don't get to people,
Exactly.
and they want the system to break so that people truly believe they can't rely on it anymore because they want it to go away. Like this is, they're try everything that came from the New Deal. They find anathema and they just want to destroy it all. And this is the big one.
Yeah.
Social Security, Medicare are the big ones.
Well, and once you cut it, like you can sort of cut out the benefits like Medicare, Medicaid, of course, is part of the big five. The Senate passed a $5 trillion tax cut bill, about half of which they are basically pretending doesn't exist, so they can pretend the deficit won't get created out of it. But Social Security is the one that they not only do you privatize it, and therefore people are more subject to the whims of the market. It
Right.
also allows private companies to now make more money off of my retirement benefits, which
Right.
currently they don't have access to.
And the data,
And the
which
data. Thank
they want that too. So it's
Well, they already got that, Larry,
yeah, they got
unfortunately.
that. They're continuing to get more, but it is really a continued attack. And let me tell you why it's so. They care so much about cutting Social Security, and they believe it's just some awful program that is awful thing for our country. That they know this pisses off voters. They are so obsessed with cutting Social Security, despite the fact that it really, really upsets voters. That's how much they care. They do not care that they're pissing off voters because they hate it so much, which is weird
Mhm.
that they feel like it's such a huge thing that's benefited so many people, but they hate it. They hate it. And despite all the data, despite all the history, despite the fact that there are a lot of people who truly rely on it just to get by, no,
Mhm.
they hate it. They don't care if it costs them votes.
Well, hopefully next year they will literally lose control and and lose power because of it. I'm curious about what your take was on the layoffs at HHS. That was the big agency this week that the Doge axe finally fell on. 10,000 employees laid off, really across the board. You had people like the former head of the FDA saying the FDA, as it existed, essentially is gone and no longer functioning the same way. This is, of course, the 3 days after the head of the vaccines division of FDA resigned in protest,
Of
saying
course.
that Kennedy basically was just interested in promoting lies and not actual
Well,
facts.
not wrong. Not wrong.
Not wrong, and the measles outbreak in Texas is getting worse. They have
Yeah.
we're up to almost 500 cases of measles now, active cases that are happening. That we haven't seen numbers like that, well, since the last century.
And certainly if you're RFK Jr., he doesn't want it to exist. He thinks like it's all creating these policies that hurt people, which is the opposite. He wants those things to go away. He doesn't want oversight. He doesn't want any regulation in terms of telling people what to do and getting people vaccinated, for example, because he's cuckoo land. So again, it's a continuing pattern. It's like they go through every agency, they try to destroy it and make it non-functional. And the hardest part is, right, we understand there are things that can be done to make things more efficient.
Yeah,
Institutions aren't
absolutely.
perfect.
Absolutely.
In fact, for a long time, the left has been the one who argued that institutions need to be fixed and improved. But we're in this weird situation of defending institutions that we know aren't perfect, but have to exist, or else people die. People are going to die, right?
Absolutely.
Make America healthy again. No, right? Make America like unhealthy again. Make America sick again. It's really returning back to the 19th century.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that really struck me, they didn't technically eliminate the program, but they did lay off the whole staff. So
Yeah, exactly.
potato,
When
potato. They fired the entire staff of the what's called LIHEAP, which is the low income heating
Yeah,
program, primarily in the Northeast, but also in some of the Midwest. Uh, people
yeah,
literally
and
will freeze to death without
no,
access to this.
this is actually the behavior of elites because they don't get hurt. People
No.
they know don't get hurt, right? And so the irony of them saying we want to take care of the working class and people who are in need, and these institutions and Democrats are elites and those sorts of, but in fact, all the stuff that they're breaking hurts the most in need the people who are not the elites, and they have no idea how it's going to experience it. It's like the person who's like the only people who will care if their social security, when they were saying the only people who will care if the social security checks are late are the people who are fraudsters. Which
Oh,
again,
that's just Howard Lutnick. Billionaire says what? Howard Lutnick. Yeah, your mother-in-law is cool. It's fine. Um, I want to circle back to the Signalgate case, which this broke almost 2 weeks ago now. But what we saw this week was two things directly related to our national security. One, the national security advisor Michael Waltz. Honestly, I don't know why the guy still has a job, because he is the one who directly invited Jeffrey Goldberg onto the chat. I do not want to let it go that actually wasn't the original sin. The original sin is that the Signal chat shouldn't have existed in the first place.
and I think they were saying there's 20 of them. That's not
Correct.
the only.
That was
There's
the
not.
news
That's
this
not the
week.
only one.
That was the news this week. But the other piece that broke, I think, yesterday was Laura Loomer, who is a white nationalist, Islamophobe, was so toxic that they had to keep her away from Trump during the campaign. Walked into the White House, I think 2 days ago, and said, "You need to fire these people from the National Security Agency."
And gone. And, and the thing is, so the insider part of this story is that Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, everyone says, oh, she's the one who keeps things not as crazy, or she's mitigated the crazy. She was at that meeting, so sanctioned, accepted. So the people who talk about, well, there are some adults in the room. There are no adults in the room. If you're going to hang out with Loomer and let her dictate to you via her various conspiracy theories that she finds in her various weird places on the internet, and then brings the list to the White House, and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, bye, 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 then there's no progress.
Exactly. Let's talk about something positive, because there were some positive things this week.
Actually, it seems so long ago, but yes.
I know, right?
Cory Booker,
Yes.
which, by the way, that's what an athlete does to get ready for stuff. He had to do, people should read up on it, all the things he had to do just to be able. So I'm like, how's he lasting this long? He broke the record for the longest filibuster
Yes.
in history,
Mhm.
and brought attention to all the madness that's going on. And in some ways, these are the few venues Democrats actually have, because you don't have the Senate, you don't have the House, you don't have the White House, and ostensibly you really don't have the court, and you do have to use your voice to really get out there. He has a much bigger platform. It really did take off, and it was amazing how much it increased people's energy.
A
It
million
really
percent.
became more.
I saw some folks who were complaining, well, that it didn't change anything, and I really couldn't disagree more. I think it finally showed that, as for the base, that Democrats are fighting. Number one, that they are fighting. It was an
Yeah,
asymmetric tactic, which we have
right.
not been doing enough of, and there's
Absolutely.
no obvious response to that,
Right.
right?
No.
So I thought that was great, and I think this quote kept going around where he admitted that the Democrats as a party had made some mistakes that got us to this moment. And to
Oh,
hear that
just some.
from a yes, to hear that from a leader was so critically important. And I think it just people felt seen right in that moment. And so
Yeah.
I not to mention all the clips we got from it now. Yeah.
Showing that you actually give a shit about things matters,
Yeah.
right? Because it is really easy to be despondent and say, "F it, I can't deal with it." And
Yeah.
I've been there. I feel that way all the time.
Yeah.
But it does take that energy and that willingness to fight and that willingness to challenge, even in the face of what someone says. What's the point? Well, the point is that if you don't start, then it's never going to start. And as leaders, we need our leaders to be that way because that's the definition of the word.
Exactly. On top of the Tesla takedowns, on top of the town halls, like this
Right.
is this is where all of the pieces of the resistance, or excuse me, the defiance, need to be coming
Yes.
together, right, in order to meet the moment and the challenge
And
and
then
the
there are
threat.
things like the race in Wisconsin with Susan
Yes,
Crawford. That judge's race is really important. That affects people. If you flip that Supreme Court back to conservatives, then there are bad things that are going to happen to people. And that was a really competitive race. Elon Musk showed his ass in Wisconsin and got beat down, which is amazing. We should all be happy about that. We should send him everywhere across the country. That only helps us because he sucks. And he is very unpopular. And yet, but as a billionaire and what they think about themselves, he went to Wisconsin in a cheesehead hat and then basically was embarrassed. So we should all feel good about that. And that was a big deal. That's another big win.
absolutely. The thing that struck me about the Musk thing on if you're the Republicans is it showed them that his money actually isn't all powerful. And
Yeah.
that signal to get sent to Republicans, where here in Washington, Trump's just dangling Musk. Oh, you want to get primaried? Oh, he'll write a
Yeah.
check.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't do that.
Right.
Be careful.
So we don't know how this plays out in a primary situation, but certainly it sent a signal that Elon Musk's money is not game, set, match.
Yep.
And not only do Democrats need to know that, but also to your point, he's an effective villain, but also it's good for Republicans to see it because maybe, just maybe,
really good point.
we can bring.
Yeah, no. Look, they're going to be terrified of them in a primary though, and that's where they get their crazy. But if that just gets them more to the right, candidate quality matters, and it's going to affect them next year.
Amen. Amen. So, pop culture moment. You are better at this than I am. So I want you to tell me what is going on in the world of pop culture we can bring back into the space.
So much this week, actually. And what we want to do when we talk about pop culture is how it actually sometimes intersects politics and policy sometimes. So a couple of things. I was actually on a trip with a bunch of Republicans this week, so I couldn't help but ask them. I said, hey, because one of the big things that happen in pop culture is like, what eyeliner does, JD Vance use? And the answer I was told was that, in fact, for those who are going to go out and buy the eyeliner, it is not eyeliner. He just does have those kind of eyes, which frankly is somewhat disappointing. I'm not sure I fully trust them, but that is what I was, we had a lot to drink.
They've signed NDAs. Maybe there's a blood oath. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know. Other big thing, obviously, the studio Ghibli, using that and creating images with it, which we created of ourselves just for fun, and it's a super fun process. I actually watched the animation. My kids love it. Ponyo is their favorite, so people should go watch that. But as much fun as I had, then I started reading up on it. There are real impacts on using AI. Just one image created actually is the equivalent of charging your smartphone.
Wow.
Completely, which I had no idea. And that's going to have some real impacts. AI is not going away. How we actually are going to have the energy to process and the computing processing for it is going to be a big question that impacts us all.
Absolutely. The other thing I will tack onto that is the intellectual property aspect to this.
Yes,
and so Sam Altman totally ignored and didn't even mention the fact that wasn't a partnership. There was no agreement between OpenAI. They just took it and did it.
Yeah.
That's
which is
not okay.
there are some real big copyright questions with AI, because what is happening with AI is they're profiting off of other people's work, other people's intellectual property. Big publishers, say the New York Times or Wikipedia, or even something like Daily Mail, because I was talking to the CEO of Daily Mail about this, and their negotiations on what their payment should be, because when you do a
Yep.
search on ChatGPT, they're drawing from those sources, but you don't send traffic to those sites. They're just scraping that information and presenting it, and there's got to be some reciprocal engagement arrangement there, and it's going to happen. It's a big deal.
Yep.
So,
Larry, I understand you're off to a ball game. I
I
am
am.
also off to a ball game, a totally different ball game. We are nowhere near each other right now.
No,
Only
unfortunately.
in my heart, Larry. But I also appreciate that your mule is in a proper mule copper situation.
Only classy. I got this Oprah in one of her episodes when Gail and her were crossing the country. She handed out Moscow mules, and
Really?
yes.
Okay.
I'll never forget that. But that's how I was like, well, I have to get him out.
Someday you'll be a billionaire too. Billionaire says what? We're gonna do a thing with
Exactly.
that. We're gonna do a thing with that.
Yes. But cheers.
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 Happy weekend, and we'll see you on the flip side of next week when things will presumably be worse.
Bye.
Bye.